Hey there, explorers. Have you been trying to learn English but feel like you're walking through a maze without a map? Maybe you've memorized some grammar rules and vocabulary lists, but when it comes to actually speaking, you freeze up. I've been exactly where you are, and I want to share something important with you. In today's video, I'll reveal the practical strategies that transformed me from a nervous beginner to a confident English speaker. Whether you're just starting out or looking to level up your skills, Native Explorer is all about making English accessible and useful in real-life situations. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll discover that mastering English can be both straightforward and enjoyable. And if you find these tips helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our community of language explorers. Hi everyone, I'm Lily from Native Explorer. And today I want to take you along on my English learning adventure. English wasn't always easy for me. In fact, I struggled tremendously when I first started. But through trial and error, I discovered some practical approaches that made a world of difference. And I'm confident they'll help you too, no matter where you are in your learning journey. Let me take you back to when I first decided to learn English. I felt completely lost. There seemed to be endless vocabulary to memorize, complicated grammar rules to understand, and pronunciation that made no sense to me. I remember feeling completely overwhelmed, wondering if I'd ever make progress. Then I had a breakthrough moment. I realized I was approaching it all wrong. Learning English isn't about trying to swallow the entire ocean at once. It's about taking small, manageable sips. It's like building a house. You need a strong foundation before you can put up the walls and roof. So I started with just the basics, the everyday words and phrases I would actually use. Hello, thank you, how are you, and goodbye. I carried a small pocket notebook everywhere and would jot down new words whenever I encountered them, reviewing them during my free moments. Speaking was terrifying at first. My heart would race every time I tried to form an English sentence around others. I was paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. But here's what changed everything for me: embracing those mistakes. Every error was actually a stepping stone toward fluency. Instead of getting discouraged, I started seeing each mistake as a lesson, an opportunity to improve, and gradually speaking became less scary. One strategy that dramatically improved my skills was immersing myself in English. I didn't worry about understanding every single word. That's not necessary, especially at the beginning. I just made sure to expose myself to English regularly through music, TV shows, and podcasts. For instance, during my daily commute to work here in Barcelona, I would listen to a podcast from New York. At first, I caught maybe 20% of what was said, but over time my comprehension improved without me even trying too hard. Want to know what made learning truly enjoyable? Finding English content I was already passionate about. For me, it was cooking shows. I started watching them with subtitles in my native language. Then I switched to English subtitles. Finally, I challenged myself to watch without any subtitles at all. Was it difficult? Absolutely. But because I loved cooking, it never felt like studying. It felt like entertainment that was helping me learn. Pronunciation was another major hurdle. Sometimes I knew exactly what to say, but people couldn't understand me because of my accent. It was incredibly frustrating. But I found a solution. I started practicing out loud, even when I was alone. I would repeat new words again and again until they felt natural. Online dictionaries with audio pronunciations became my best friends, especially for those tricky English words that sound nothing like they're spelled. Now let's talk about the grammar monster. I used to get so caught up in trying to form grammatically perfect sentences that I'd end up saying nothing at all. That's when I had an important realization. Perfect grammar isn't required for effective communication. Yes, grammar matters, but connection matters more. So I focused first on simply getting my point across. And as I became more comfortable, my grammar naturally improved. Reading became another powerful tool in my journey. I started with children's books. They're simple and usually have helpful illustrations. Then I moved to short stories and eventually to news articles online. Did I understand every word? Not at all. But I grasped the main ideas, and that's what counted. Reading helped me learn vocabulary and context, which made it much easier to remember later. If there's one secret to success in language learning, it's consistency. I committed to practicing at least 15 minutes every day. Sometimes more, sometimes just barely making that goal, but always doing something. Whether it was speaking, listening, reading, or writing, daily practice made all the difference in the world. Speaking of writing, don't underestimate its power. I began by writing simple messages to friends who were patient with my English. Later, I started keeping a journal. Writing helped me organize my thoughts and think about language structures without the pressure of having to respond immediately like in conversation. A game changer for me was finding a language exchange partner online. We would practice English for a while and then switch to helping them with my native language. Having someone to regularly practice with didn't just improve my language skills, it boosted my confidence tremendously. The more I practiced with my partner, the easier it became to use English in real-world situations. Here's a creative tip that worked wonders for me. I labelled everything in my apartment with sticky notes showing their English names. My door, window, refrigerator, and even coffee maker all had their English names proudly displayed. Every time I looked at these objects, I would say the words out loud. These small but frequent reminders helped cement vocabulary into my memory effortlessly. Another technique that accelerated my progress was training myself to think in English. Initially, I would think in my native language and then translate in my head, which was slow and cumbersome. So I started forcing myself to think directly in English, even if it was just simple thoughts like, "I'm tired," or "I need to go shopping." The more I practiced thinking in English, the more natural it became, and soon the mental translation process began to fade away. Never be afraid to ask questions. At first, I was too embarrassed to ask when I didn't understand something. I worried people would think I wasn't smart enough, but I discovered that asking questions is actually the fastest route to improvement. Whether it was clarifying a word, asking someone to speak more slowly, or checking if I was using a phrase correctly, each question brought me closer to fluency. Let me share a funny learning moment. Once, while trying to tell a friend I was excited about a concert, I said I was very sighted instead of excited. My friend burst out laughing, and at first I felt so embarrassed. But then I laughed too, and now it's a running joke between us. Learning to laugh at your own mistakes makes the whole process less stressful and more enjoyable. Remember, patience is essential. Language learning isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. There were many days when I felt like I wasn't improving quickly enough, times when I wanted to give up entirely. But I reminded myself that learning English isn't a competition. Everyone progresses at their own pace, and that's perfectly okay. To sum it all up, my English learning journey has been challenging but incredibly rewarding. I used a combination of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and consistent practice. I made countless mistakes, asked tons of questions, and found ways to make learning enjoyable rather than tedious. Most importantly, I never gave up, and neither should you. Whether you're just beginning or you've been learning for years, remember that every step forward, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goal. Now it's your turn to apply these strategies. Don't fear mistakes, ask questions whenever you need to, and find ways to enjoy the process. With time and effort, you'll improve, just as I did. When I first started learning English, I had to constantly remind myself that progress takes time. There were frustrating periods when I felt stuck, like I was putting in effort but not seeing results. However, I soon realized that even small victories, like understanding a joke in English or successfully giving directions to a tourist, were signs of progress. Sometimes these improvements were so subtle that I didn't notice them right away, but they were happening. The key to language learning is patience. Fluency doesn't happen overnight, and that's completely normal. For example, when I first moved to Sydney, everyday situations were incredibly challenging. I remember my first attempt to open a bank account. My hands were shaking as I tried to explain what I needed. The sentences came out jumbled, and I felt completely embarrassed. But I took a deep breath, and the bank employee was patient with me. After a few attempts, I managed to communicate effectively, and I left with not just a new account, but also a sense of accomplishment. My advice is to be gentle with yourself. It's absolutely normal to have good days where the words flow easily and bad days where even basic sentences feel impossible. The most important thing is to keep moving forward and never abandon your journey. Speaking of journeys, let me tell you about something fascinating I discovered that completely changed how I think about language learning. Did you know that our brains actually process a new language differently depending on when we learn it? Scientists have found that languages we learn as adults activate different brain regions than our native language. When I first heard this, I was amazed. It explained why learning English felt so different from speaking my first language. But here's the incredible part. Our brains are remarkably adaptable. The more we practice, the more efficient these neural pathways become. It's like creating a shortcut in your mind. At first, the path is overgrown and difficult to travel, but with each practice session, it becomes clearer and easier to follow. This is why immersion works so well. Each time you hear, speak, read, or write in English, you're strengthening those pathways. And research shows that positive emotions actually enhance this process. Learning in a relaxed, enjoyable environment helps your brain form stronger connections. This is why watching shows you love or talking about topics you're passionate about in English can speed up your progress dramatically. Understanding this science gave me patience with myself. Language learning isn't just about memorization, it's about literally rewiring parts of your brain. So be proud of every small step you take. Your brain is accomplishing something truly remarkable. Setting specific, achievable goals helped me stay motivated. Saying I want to learn English is a wonderful ambition, but it's too broad. To make it manageable, I broke it down into smaller targets. One week, I focused on learning 10 new food-related words and used them in conversations until they felt natural. The next week, my goal was to have a 3-minute conversation with the barista at my local coffee shop. These smaller achievements kept me motivated because I could clearly see my progress. Every time I reached a goal, no matter how small, I celebrated it as a victory. I once set a particularly challenging goal for myself, giving a short presentation in English at a community event. It was for a local volunteer project, and the thought of speaking in front of a group terrified me. I practiced for weeks, rehearsing my speech countless times. When the day arrived, I was so nervous that I could barely breathe. I stumbled over a few words and had to pause to remember certain phrases, but I made it through the entire presentation in English. Afterward, the sense of pride I felt was indescribable. It taught me that pushing beyond your comfort zone is scary, but it's where the most significant growth happens. Finding ways to connect English with things I already loved made learning much more enjoyable. For instance, I've always been passionate about photography. I discovered English language photography forums and YouTube tutorials. At first, the technical terminology was challenging, but because I was genuinely interested in the content, I persevered. Over time, my understanding improved dramatically. The photography vocabulary that once seemed impossible became second nature. The key is to find something you're passionate about and make it part of your English learning journey. It could be sports, cooking, art, or technology. When you're enjoying yourself, learning happens almost automatically. One of the most rewarding aspects of my journey was connecting with other English learners from around the world. We formed a small online community where we practiced together, shared resources, and supported each other through challenges. Having people who understood exactly what I was going through made everything more enjoyable. We would laugh at our common mistakes, celebrate our victories, and motivate each other during difficult times. I remember when a friend from Brazil confused kitchen with chicken and talked about cooking dinner in her chicken. We all laughed together, knowing we'd all made similar mix-ups. Having a supportive community makes the journey feel less isolating and more fun. Looking back at how far I've come, I'm amazed at my progress. There were so many moments when I thought fluency was an impossible dream. But here I am, sharing my story with you in English. If I can do it, you absolutely can too. Remember the strategies I've shared. Be patient with yourself. Embrace your mistakes as learning opportunities. Set small achievable goals. Incorporate English into activities you already enjoy. And if possible, find others to share the journey with. It won't always be easy, but every step brings you closer to fluency. One day you'll look back and be astonished at how much you've learned. You might even laugh at some of the mistakes you once made. But trust me, every challenge you overcome will be worth it in the end. After I started feeling comfortable with basic English, I decided to push myself further. I wasn't satisfied with just knowing enough to get by. I wanted to understand humour, follow fast-paced conversations, and watch movies without subtitles. The idea was both exciting and intimidating, but I reminded myself that this was just another phase of my journey. As I continued practicing, things that once seemed impossible gradually became achievable. I noticed that my growing skills brought increasing confidence. Confidence doesn't appear suddenly. It builds slowly, one positive experience at a time. For instance, I used to get extremely anxious about making phone calls in English. I would rehearse what to say repeatedly before dialing, and if the conversation went off script, I would panic. But after several successful calls, I realized that most people are patient and willing to help. There was one time I called a restaurant to make a reservation, and instead of asking for a table, I accidentally asked for a stable. The host was momentarily confused, then we both laughed when I corrected myself. That moment taught me that minor mistakes aren't disasters. They're just part of learning. When you're too tense, it's difficult to think clearly. By staying relaxed, your conversations will flow much more naturally. Practice deep breathing before speaking if you feel nervous. It really helps. Practicing with native speakers accelerated my progress tremendously. I was fortunate to have a coworker who spoke English fluently and was always willing to help. During lunch breaks, we would chat, and whenever I made a mistake, they would gently correct me without making me feel inadequate. If you don't have access to native speakers in person, don't worry. There are numerous apps and websites where you can find language exchange partners. This exposure to natural conversational English taught me all the expressions, slang, and idioms that you won't find in textbooks. Speaking of idioms, I'll never forget my confusion the first time someone told me they were feeling under the weather. I looked up at the sky, completely puzzled about how someone could be beneath the weather. Later, I learned it simply means feeling sick or unwell. Idioms can be confusing initially because they rarely make sense when translated literally, but mastering them brings you closer to sounding like a native speaker. The perspective shift that truly changed everything was when I stopped seeing English as a subject to study and started viewing it as a tool for connection. It's not just about grammar rules and vocabulary lists. It's about communicating with people, discovering new ideas, and exploring different cultures. When I began using English as a means to learn about topics I was interested in, rather than seeing English itself as the subject, everything became more engaging and meaningful. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or discouraged on your English learning journey, remember that it's a process that unfolds over time. Be kind to yourself, celebrate small victories, and enjoy the journey. Set achievable goals, connect with others, and find ways to make learning enjoyable. One day soon you'll be sharing your own success story in English, just as I'm doing now. Once I started using English as a tool for discovery rather than just a subject to master, everything transformed. I no longer viewed it as an obligation or academic requirement, but as a key that unlocked new knowledge, perspectives, and relationships. By reading articles, watching documentaries, and conversing with people from diverse backgrounds about topics that fascinated me, English became something I wanted to improve, not something I had to learn. It wasn't just another checkbox on my to-do list. It became the bridge connecting me to a world of ideas and communities I couldn't have accessed otherwise. Now I'd love to hear from you. What's your biggest challenge with learning English? Drop a comment below and let me know which tip you're going to try first. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Native Explorer for more practical language learning content. Hit that notification bell too, so you never miss our weekly tips and strategies. Thanks for exploring with me today. I'll see you in the next adventure.